In this video, I'd like to look at a web page. So look at some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that features a bunch of checkboxes, movies that the user can say whether the user has seen or not. This was version 3, so each time we try to get a little bit more sophisticated, especially on the JavaScript side. And so in this version, the checkboxes are going to not be in design in the HTML, they're going to be added by the JavaScript. So that'll be the main new feature in this version 3 of this code. The URL for this code can be seen here. So in terms of its actions, it's the same old page for the most part. The user can pick from the set of checkboxes which movies have been seen. There's this, that's the click event of the button. There are also click events of the movies to take away the results if they are changed, and then the user must sort of reselect them. Okay. And there's also, so there's some alert. And there's also, if we look here in inspect, there's also some console logging that you can see down here. Raging Bull, Citizen Kane. So we're showing some things in the console, putting some things on the page, we're popping up some alerts. That's what the code does. So let's have a look. We have at the top here, I'm starting with the HTML. The HTML in the head connects to the style. In case you haven't seen the other versions of this, there's some body style, some div and some input style. Both the buttons and the checkboxes are inputs. Here's a styling of just input, but then we can distinguish between the button input by using this type, this attributes CSS selection. So now we're just selecting out the button. Here we're specifically setting out the sort of hover state of the button. So when the mouse goes over the button, the label contains the text, and sitting next to the checkboxes, inline means it can share on a line with other things, and block means you can assign it a width. So they're going to be on the same line as the checkboxes, but I can give them all a width. So they're not just the length needed for the name of the title of the movie, but they can expand further. And here is the styling of the labels that are next to the checked checkboxes. So we're looking for inputs of the type checkbox that are in the check state, and then we're looking for the element that's next to them. If it happens to be a label, then change the styling. So the selected movies look different than the non-selected movies from this styling. Okay. So here's the HTML. You can see now the HTML is very short, very succinct, because all mostly what's on this page is checkboxes, and we're going to add them dynamically. So we just make a place, this div with the ID of div movies for adding the checkboxes. I decided not to add the button or the other div dynamically, so I put them here in design, but I made a space for the movies. So this would be sort of if you want to change the movies, maybe they're looking at specific genres. Here's a list of horror movies. Here's a list of action movies. And then you can have the same page and just dynamically load the checkboxes. There might be different numbers of them. There may be, they're certainly going to have different titles for those different genres. Okay. And then down here at the bottom of the page, we are sort of connecting to the JavaScript. Now we need an array with the list of the movies, and we are finding out target div is connecting to the element on the page where we're going to put the checkboxes. And here we are looping over using a sort of a for each style of looping. So start with the array, use for each. And then we're going to have, as we iterate over the elements of the array, we're going to execute a function for each iteration. And the arguments of that function are going to be the element of the array. So I said EL, I think at other times I've said item, and then the counter I. Okay, so I'm going to create an input element. I'm going to give it an attribute of type checkbox, give it another attribute of type value, which is going to have the value of value is going to be the counter I. When we're working with arrays, that's a very useful value to be working with. The name attribute, which is how we group things, is going to be check movie with the square brackets. That's an odd name. We don't need it for JavaScript, but I'm just setting up in case somebody were to also use the same page to maybe connect to some server-side language like PHP. I'm setting an attribute of ID. The purpose of ID is to work in conjunction with the label. And so all I need is something unique. And so I'm just saying the word check and then the EL, which is the name of the movie. I'm also assigning it an onclick event and saying here is the function, and it's going to handle the onclick. And I'm sending it the keyword this in case that function wants to, for some reason, know explicitly which checkbox got it to the handle checkbox click function. That must be defined below. And once we have our checkbox and all its attributes defined, we add it as a child, append child to our target div. That was the most complicated one. Now we're going to work with the associated label. So we're create an element of the label type. The main attribute for the label is the for attribute, which is going to match the ID of the corresponding checkbox. So here we see in 14, we're setting up the ID, and here in 20, we're setting up the for of the label, and they must match, and they do. We're creating HTML has a sort of a parent-child structure. There are tags. A label has an open and a close tag, and then you can put things in the tag. So we're creating a node. Sort of that's like a tree idea. Create a node, and it's specifically a node with text in it. And I'm putting in EL, which was the element of the array, which was a title of a movie. And then we're adding to the label a child. So we're making tag, which has an open and a close, and we're giving it a child, which is the text of the movie, and then we're going and adding Y, which was the label, and adding that to the div. So there are two levels of append child here. The label gets added to the div, and then the text gets added to the label, or sort of more in the reverse order of that, logically. Okay. And then our third element that we're adding is a break. And a break is just a break, a simple thing. So create the break and add it to the target div. So that is the loop, then created the checkboxes dynamically. And then most of the rest is the same as what we had before. Add a click event to the button. Enable the button when the page starts. Make sure that any movies are not checked. We just made them and we didn't say they were checked, so that's probably unnecessary. We just dynamically generated them and said nothing about their checked property, so they're unchecked. So that's a little redundant, but I sort of had it left over from 4. Here's handling the button. What we get out of this group of checkboxes is a list of movies. So the input, the ultimate thing we're getting from the user is an array. So here we're starting with an empty array. We're using the query selector approach and grabbing the checked checkboxes, and then we're looping over the checked checkboxes. And so we have an array of checked checkboxes, and then we want to get from that the corresponding array of just movie titles. And so that's what this loop is accomplishing for us. Looping over the checked checkboxes and grabbing their values and pushing them onto the user input. So we're getting a simple array of just movie titles there. we're asking if the length of that array is 0, then they didn't choose any movies. Otherwise, we're alerting out the movies using join. So between all the movies, putting a comma and a space, also console logging it, and also displaying it on the page. On the page, our join, the thing we're putting in the join is a break. So each movie will be on its own line. We are disabling the button so that they can't keep clicking the button. It would make no sense. They haven't, it's the same movie, so why perform any action? Here is the, if they click on any of the checkboxes, if they click on any checkbox, we clear out the results. They're changing their mind about something, so we're clearing out the results. We are enabling the button so that they can click it again and now display the new set of movies that they've chosen. They might have taken one off the list, they might have added one to the list, and we're doing some console logging. When we were adding the attribute that was connecting to the, when we were adding the onclick attribute connecting to the code, we had an argument of this, so we knew which element came here. Down here, I called it LM, and I'm not using it explicitly, except I'm putting it in the console to say, here I have it. I know I have access to it in case. So I have access to the whole element, the whole checkbox. So I can tell you its value, which was the title of the movie. No, sorry, it was not the title of the movie. My mistake. It was the index of the movie. And then here is the title of the movie using that index. And then here is whether the checkbox was checked or not. So I would say, if I'm checking the checkbox, this will say true. If I'm unchecking the checkbox, it will say false. So I'm going to go to Titanic. Here's the console. We can watch the console down here. I'm going to check Titanic, and it says 9. That was the 10th movie with an index of 9. Its value was Titanic, or the value of the checkbox was a 9. Then the array evaluated at that index of 9 was Titanic, and it was true because I just checked it. And if I uncheck it now, it's 9 Titanic false. So that's what 78 is doing. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you. Thanks very much for your attention.